Hello everybody, our gardening channel. Today we're going to be showing you guys how to prune figs, and we'll tell you everything you need to know, how to cut, what to cut, and when to cut. Firstly, and most importantly, is the most important factor: timing. You're going to want to prune your figs when they are in this dormant state like this, when all of their leaves are dropped, or whenever your dormant season is for your climate. And the reason we do this is, of course, it's way easier. The nutrients are all stored down in the roots, and we can direct where the plant is going to grow, and it's much easier, much less leaves, much less stuff to deal with, and the plant will launch in the spring the way we want it to, take off and grow. When you don't want to prune is right as the figs are budding up, or like starting their first leaves. The reason for this is a lot of that energy would be in the tips and the points, and a lot of that energy could be wasted. So don't wait too long until you prune your figs. And of course, if you live in a tropical climate or a climate where your figs don't really go dormant, then just do it whenever it's the dry season, or whenever those figs drop their leaves the most, because even in a tropical climate they will drop their leaves during certain times of years more than others. Now all you really need is going to be some handheld pruners and a wood cutting saw or a pruning saw or anything like that. And you don't want pruners that are larger than this, these handheld pruners. You don't want those pruners that cut off entire limbs of a tree, because they're gonna really squash the wood on the tree, and it's gonna cause a lot of cracking, and you're not gonna get those precise cuts. So for any cuts that are on larger or thicker limbs, we're gonna use a saw. And make sure you sterilize all of your surfaces, because we are going to be cutting into the plant. We don't want to introduce any pests or disease. We want to reduce that risk. So make sure you sterilize them with alcohol or any kind of heat source or fire. Okay, so in this video we're going to be doing many trees to show many examples and give you an idea on how to do it. But the first thing you always want to do when it comes to pruning ththese trees is, of course, take off any dead or damaged wood. So especially after we get our cold now, we can kind of tell what areas dried out. So if this will focus, you will be able to see that this area here is dried out a lot. We'll show many other trees, so don't worry. You want to cut out any of those dried areas, any areas that are clearly not alive and have been damaged by the cold, because even though our climate doesn't necessarily get cold enough most times to kill figs, it will get cold enough to damage some of the tips, especially if we have a sudden cold front or whatnot. The next thing you want to look at is form. How do you want your tree's form to be? If you want your tree's form to be as a bush, then very simply just thin out all the side growth. So for example, if it's like this, kind of bushy, you want to clean out all these small side shoots and whatnot, in order to make sure there's a lot of air circulation, and to make sure that there is not a lot of competing branches and shading and whatnot. So I'm just gonna cut off all these small side branches that I don't want really close to the ground. Now that is if you're doing bushing. For me, I'm not really doing bushing. Bushing is the easiest, because really it's just cutting off those branches in the middle to let light come in. But bushing is really for colder climates, or plants that don't need that much maintenance. So if yours is a bush, you just remove some of the dead branches, some of those branches that are really cluttering the middle, and essentially just declutter the plant, make it a little more, let more airflow be through, let more new growth be through. So bushes are really the easiest form of figs to manage. But if you want a fig that aesthetically looks better, in my opinion at least, and that produces a little bit better, especially if you are growing in pots, or if you want just a few limbs that are easy to manage in an organized tree, then we're going to show you how to do it in a kind of tree manner. So as you can see, this fig, if we look at the base of it, it has one main trunk here, and it has a side shoot that came up from last year. Now I honestly don't want this side shoot. I kind of neglected this plant for a while, so although it might look like a lot, we are going to cut down this side shoot, this very large limb coming out of the ground. But before we do that, we don't want to cut the entire thing from the bottom. You want to cut it very gradually. So we'll start up at the top and gradually move on to the bottom. Now for any thick limbs that we want to cut off, we do want to use a saw. So for example, you can see this tree, I want it in tree form. And you can see here, there's a branch down here that's way too low to the ground. You can see this is the grass here, this is the branch. So I definitely want to cut this off, but since it is part of the main plant, I'm going to use a saw and very gradually do it. Actually, I'm going to do this bottom one first. Here, you can see this one. I'm going to do this one first, and you want to be as close to it as possible, flush, but not too close so that you don't damage the main trunk. So we're gonna move very slowly. We start here, near the node. And as you can see, we've removed that in one nice, relatively flush cut, and that should heal over. Again, we're in the dormant season, so as the plant begins to bring up nutrients, when it warms up and starts to wake up, it will heal this over fairly quickly. And again, better to do this in the winter since there's not that many bugs to damage it or try to get in there. And we're gonna do the same to this. And we have cut off the other limb. You can see they're relatively flushed, a little bit on the out. I really don't want to damage that main trunk, and it should heal over relatively quickly anyhow. Now let's get over to the rest of shaping this tree. So now we're going to get into the rest of the shaping of this tree, as I said. And since this tree is actually very young, which is why I'm being so heavy with the pruning, because I want to make sure that the structure of this tree in the long term is good. So we're going to, as I said, get any of these small little growth over here on the side, which is that I don't want, you know, over here for example, here. I really want this thing to focus on the upper growth and the strong upper fruiting branches that are going to get the most sunlight. Here you can see this is kind of just coming in the middle. I really don't want this. These are going to be slow growing, they're not going to do much, so we're going to prune them out too. Yep. Now let's move to the other side. And let me just make it clear, pruning the figs heavily like this may actually reduce your production, at least initially for that first year, especially on young plants. It will slightly reduce the production, but in the long term, it's really going to be worth it. So now we have a far cleaner looking tree than when we first started, but we're not done yet because we want this thing to branch up on the top. Now we've cut so much, the plant is literally just going to grow straight up. We want the plant to start make many branches at this point, because we don't want it to get too tall, but we don't want it to be too, you know, all the way, the foliage should be all the way in the ground. We want it to grow up but have many fruiting branches going up. So what we're going to do is simply just snip them on the top. And you can see this one was cut. See what I mean? Make sure your sharp tools, flush cuts, you want to make sure of that. This, you can see this, for example, this is growing like right here. It's gonna grow straight up. I don't want that. I want it to grow out. The way you can tell if a branch is gonna grow out, let me get clear on this one, is see these over here, these will grow out. I want these to grow out, so I want the plant to grow in that direction. So I'm going to just give it a very short snip over here, and you can see there's actual brevas on here. I hope they form these brevas. And basically we're just gonna head all of these branches. Obviously I want to keep some of these brevas, but I'll have to sacrifice them for the sake of the tree. Now you can see I actually made a wrong cut over here because I pruned inwards. I want the outward growth. I want it to grow from here, so I'm gonna cut it back a little more. Perfect. Try to make sure you're angling it as best as possible to avoid any cracking on the branches. Now you can see the tree's improved significantly. I will cut all the side growth over here. You can see this one's actually kind of died back here on the tip, but I don't want this as a whole. I want the tree completely to focus on that upper and vertical growth on the higher parts of the tree. And then you can see this one's kind of growing inwards. It's gonna block the sunlight in the long term. I'm just gonna completely cut it out. And you can see this is dead actually. If you shake it like this, you can tell it's way drier than the rest of the tree. The dieback will show up differently in each climate in the world, but once you really learn if they've died back or not, then you'll know. It might appear green still, but it has died back. And I'll show you a plant that had even more dieback than this one. So you can see we have a far better form and structure. You can see there's one last branch over here. I have to decide, am I gonna keep that? Am I gonna remove that? For the most part, I think I will remove that just so the tree can focus completely on those upper growth. You can see there, nice flush cut. So if you're watching until now, thanks for your patience. If you move on to this side, I forgot even more over here on these sides. And this specific way of pruning is only for, if you want your tree to be in tree form. If it's in bush form, you really don't have to care much, as I said, except for making sure that the tree is just pruned every winter to, declutter it. There's one more branch over here. And so we're gonna cut that back too. Oh, I should have used the saw for that one. That was a little bit harsh. A little one over here. And so all this like side growth that I'm cutting off, it's really gonna distract the tree from its main goal of growing upwards. And you can see any dead growth, you want to obviously cut that, remove that. You don't want any dead growth or any chance for borers to get in. And you can see this is our final form of the tree. We have two branches over here that are growing out. I've topped them, so they should start getting growth over here and over here. I've topped this one, so it should grow over here towards that direction. I've tipped this one so that it starts growing into this direction and this direction. And I've cut this one so that it grows in that direction. Let's take a step back. You can see the tree is way far better formed than it was, and it doesn't look completely perfect because you can see it's kind of like leaning towards this direction, but that shouldn't be a problem because we will just have some growth come out from here and it will balance it all out. It will be perfect. As you can see, we have a nice tree form. It was heavy, but it will benefit the tree in the long term, especially that we're doing it now in dormancy. It shouldn't hit it as hard as if we did it just before budding. Okay, here we have another tree, and this tree structures actually quite well. We're gonna prune it obviously, but the main thing with this tree is that it took quite some dieback. You can see here, if I can focus, you can see all this drying. This is all dead branching, so we want to at least cut it back till here. If we go up on a tip like this, you can see it's really dry all the way down here, so we'll cut it down to probably this breba, if this breba ever forms. I hope it does. You can see here there's some, I don't know what this is, either cold dieback, sun damage, whatnot. I think I'll just remove the entire branch at this point. You can see small growth here like this. You don't want that downward facing growth. Anything going towards the fence that's small and whatnot here. We do want to tip these at the top, and I know it might seem harsh, but this is actually slightly dieback, if that's clear. There's dieback over here, so we're going to cut it towards the outward facing branch, which is over here. So we're going to, this is a shoot, obviously. We can leave this actually. We'll just prune it to over here. And you want to make sure your cuts are also slightly curved so the water comes off. And so you can see we've finished this tree. It was already organized to begin with. It wasn't that bad, so this was very easy. Not a lot of pruning on this one. Oh, there's one little side branch here. I don't want that. That's probably dead anyways. So you can see, very nice, very organized. Now, one last thing is, as your figs are growing, you can actually control their growth. I did a video before about how to pinch them and kind of rub your hand and remove the growth you don't want. So, for example, I want this tree to grow in this direction. If I have growth coming inside to this direction, I can just simply remove it, rub it with my hand, and control the growth from there. It's very easy. I know this video might have seemed long, seem long, but it's very simple. You control the plant, you grow it the way that you, essentially the way you prune it, the way you manage it. So you can see these trees are a nice tree form now, and in a couple months in summer I'll do a video and we'll see how these figs are structured. So that's really all when it comes to pruning. If you guys have any questions, this applies for both pots and in grounds too. This is mainly for tree form. You can apply some of these pruning rules for bush form as well, but as I said, bushes are way easier to manage. This is mainly for tree form. So yeah, that's basically how you prune figs. It's not that complicated. Do it the way that you see manageable. Cut off all the dead growth, direct the plant to where and how you want it to grow. So yeah, that's all. Have a great day, guys. Thank you.